I can invite everybody to join us, those who are in the studio, to start. Olivier.
Yes, because we have a great innovation. We have 2 panelists here on stage. You can take a seat, Christophe and Nicolas. We are 5 in this panel, so I will do short introductions. So we start with the ladies. Can we get the ladies on the screen somewhere? So we have Alexia again. So she was in a panel this morning. She's there as the coordinator of the Quantum Engineering Grenoble. We have Eline Diamanti, who has also many roles, but she's here as a co-coordinator of the PCQC, the Quantum Hub for Paris. We have Pascal, who has many roles as well, but she's here as the head of the similar organization based in Saclay, next to Paris. Nicolas, there. You also created an ecosystem in Paris. You're going to explain that from Sorbonne University and other labs. And Christophe Jurzac is the other godfather of the ecosystem, particularly in the funding aspect of quantum startups, and also you're chairman of a couple companies we saw in these discussions. So the goal of this panel is to understand what are the key success factors of building an ecosystem, what were also the learnings from the existing ecosystem. And we will start with Pascal. Pascal, can you tell us, in a summarily way, what is special with a quantum ecosystem compared to other classical technology ecosystem?
Thanks for the introduction. So, well, like for any quantum revolution, you need a bit of different ingredients to make it work. You need research, engineering, innovation, and education. And there is something special with quantum technology, is that, and it was already shown during the whole day today, a lot of it, many of these innovations are still in the labs, in the academic lab. And we know, and I think even all the startups know that, they will need to be fed for many, many more years, but by fundamental research. So we need to keep the link between the startups, the industry, and the fundamental research. It's also a technological revolution that is highly interdisciplinary. We need a lot of links between physics, engineering, computer science for this to work. And last but not least, and especially in France, but everywhere else, I think this quantum revolution builds on a community which is at the beginning not very large. And we need to grow to bring in many new actors. And of course, this needs to build new education programs, either initial or professional ones. So this is why actually to foster this quantum revolution at the international level, we've seen the emergence of quantum centers. And we have now a few in France as well, and this panel is a good representation of that. And these quantum centers are the perfect place for making these missing links and the links that we need to build for this ecosystem to emerge. We all know that it's when you bring people every day in the same place to work together on a very well-defined project, that they learn how to speak to each other, to work together, to somehow remove the barriers that we need to remove between different disciplines in physics, computer science, engineering, to create more links between academia and industry, and also to shape and make the education program evolve in a smart way to feed this ecosystem.
Thank you, Pascal. So we switch to Alexia. Alexia, can you explain us how do you connect the various roles, particularly in the research area and beyond research? I hope.
How I connect the various worlds? What?
Oh, sorry. How do you connect the roles? How do you make sure a researcher work together and you manage interdisciplinarity?
Yes, so yeah, actually, it's a bit to bounce back on what Pascal said, because there was a word that was on the verge of the mouth, which is the word short loops between fundamental research and industry, going through innovation. And actually, to generate these short loops, if you want to win something in time, the idea is to pay something in space. So the good place is the small ecosystem. Everyone that would be gathered on the same place, so the industrial and the fundamental researcher. So there is something that is also very important in this ecosystem, which is the fact that everyone keeps its own identity, in the sense that fundamental research works on long time scales, and at the same time, entrepreneurs, industrials, they are shorter time scales in mind. So that's a strange pairing that we need to operate between these two different logics. And the ecosystem is the perfect place for that, because you don't put one entity at the service of the other. Fundamental research is not at the service of industry, and vice versa. Industry is not here to give money to fundamental research. So there are new ways to interact that we need to invent. And again, the fact that we know each other is something that will bring these new interaction and these new models to couple fundamental research and innovation.
Good. You had a word for that, serendipity, no?
Yes, you taught me the word.
Ah, okay.
Okay, so
Sorry, yeah.
maybe we can go to Eleni, and I have a question for you that we covered a lot of topic on quantum computing. We discussed a lot about quantum computing in this conference. Can you tell us about the other quantum technology and the role of those other technology and how they link within the ecosystem? And if you can tell us about the other international model that we can learn from there.
Sure, of course. Thanks a lot, Elham. Thanks a lot, Olivier. It's very nice to see everyone. So indeed, we have talked more about quantum computing today. It's one of the most important pillars of quantum technologies, but it's important to consider the whole ecosystem, thematic ecosystem of quantum technologies more globally, and include in it all the different pillars. And I'm talking about pillars because it has been structured a bit like this in the international community, and in particular in Europe. So quantum computing and simulation should be complemented with communication, quantum communication and quantum sensing and metrology, to form the full spectrum of applications that one can expect from quantum technologies. So it's important to take this into account when we build these quantum ecosystems that we have tried to do, exactly like we have tried to do in all our centers. In Paris, in Saclay, in Grenoble, and elsewhere in France and in the world, because it's extremely important to foster interactions between the scientific communities that evolve in all of these different directions, let's say, flavors, I could call it like this, of quantum technologies. And this is one of the main things that we're trying, principles that we're trying to develop in the Paris Center Hub. That is expanding from the previous PCQC, and I think that from this interaction we can expect to see very fruitful outcomes from a scientific point of view. Each of these sectors has a lot to learn from the other. This is my conclusion, and I think quantum communication is a nice vector to visualize this, because the ultimate goal in the end of quantum communication networks is exactly to connect quantum devices, right? Which can be simulators, computers, sensors. So in addition to the operation and the functioning of each one of these devices, and it's nice to think about it in the future as a whole infrastructure connecting all these devices. So I think this connection between the quantum technologies is one of the main guiding lines that we are trying to follow in our various ecosystems that we have seen, that we are trying to develop in France, and we have seen it happen successfully elsewhere as well. Of course, again, there is different directions that equivalent structures are taken in the world. We know that there are quantum centers, very successful ones in the Netherlands, of course, with QTech and QSoft. I'm thinking of Munich. I'm thinking of Canada with IQC, of Singapore, CQT. So there is many wonderful examples that we can learn from. And the particularity of the structure here in France is that we have, I hope we have shown this today in quantum computing, very high-class research everywhere, and beautiful interaction between industry and scientists, but also in all the other technologies, in quantum communication and sensing and all of this. So we need to use this ecosystem to build upon this scientific excellence to bring it closer to applications.
Thank you, Eleni. By the way, you must forgive us because we ask different questions to everybody, but you can answer all the questions, so we are kind of specializing each of you. Sure. So it's going to be the case for you, Nicola. Alexia wanted to ask a question or to do some remark? I'm not sure. So Nicolas, a very narrow question. You know, the hubs and the quantum ecosystem have a very, very big role in coordinating education. And you know that in the next years, it's going to be very important to have more engineers, more researchers, postdocs. So how can you manage the coordination between all the schools or the universities to make sure that this is going well?
Yeah, so this is very, I think it's a very important point, and you have a lot of challenges to overcome to do that. So first, one of the questions you can ask is quantum technologies or quantum information a new field that you have to teach or something new, or a conjunction of computer science, physics, different things. So this is something to be thought all together. And there's not one university that can answer this question. It's a worldwide question. And we have to do that also in conjunction with industry, because they are the ones that want to bring what we do as researchers to the public. So in order to do that, we have to coordinate researchers and education. So this is we know how to do. We do that all the time. That's our job. But we also need to coordinate education and industry so that we feed each other on what we need and what we can do. And if I can say, we also need to coordinate education and education, which means that we don't want university to work all alone. We don't want schools to work all alone. This is a joint effort that has to be all together. And that's why we have this center that, you know, imbricate. So it looks like a very complex ecosystem, and it is our job, our ambitions to make these people work together. And one last, and I think very important point, if we manage to work together, then we can educate also the public and the politics. Because we are bringing a new disruptive technologies. And it's very important that the public and the politics know what this is about, so that we don't have some fear of new technologies coming into the public.
And so how do you manage that? You have a common training across different schools and different universities, or is it a different way to organize that?
I mean, all is to build. Some centers already have formations. At our university, we already have some teaching of quantum science, but we are working together. So for instance, now we associate with the University of Paris, with Sorbonne University, with PSL, and we are trying to build a master program all together so that we make people speak together. And we need to have a panel of industry people that have a look. Of course, we are a university, so we teach what we want to teach, that's what we do, but we need to have industry people looking at that. But this is in progress, and it's important to be here to really claim that we want to work together, and this has to be done.
Excellent.
If I can add, we also collaborate with foreign countries. You know, many countries are ahead of us, and we have to catch up and to learn from them so that we can bring that to
And you want to attract the foreign talent as well?
Well, everybody wants to.
Of course, yeah.
Yes,
everybody wants to do the same. Okay. Okay.
So, Christophe, before I ask you something regarding the startup, obviously, I have a special question coming from the panel, from the discussion on the chat. They want to know that why quantum is so special in order to provide leading gender balance, especially looking at the panel composition. What is special about quantum that has provided this equality?
It's a tricky question. Next question.
Oh, we can ask the ladies, you know, to tell us.
There's a trick of the trade, like you say.
That's a good one. Yeah, but I think it's definitely something that, well, we as investors as well, so have two roles here. I mean, investor in Free Quantum Nation in startups, and as well as a role of chairman of Le Lab Quantique that we have co-founded with BPI France and some others. Definitely that's a question as investors that we're looking at, that we're really attentive to. And that's definitely a problem today in terms of hiring for startups. When I look at Pascal, for example, I think the proportion of males is probably 100%. Just as of today, it's definitely something that...
No, but the challenge was say that is actually good. In quantum is good, you know. You look at
not good at all.
So it's not good at all.
Condela is doing better, I think.
Here we have a very specific situation. The only place in the world, maybe, when talking about quantum, we have so many ladies. So it's very, very specific. But that's a problem. Yes.
Okay. So let's go to the main question that we have for you. How can we develop a strong enterprise ecosystem? This is something that you have been leading from a startup to SME. And what is it special about quantum that you think is different with the previous ecosystem?
So maybe I'm starting with the second question. So there are things that are special with quantum startups, but there are things that are common to any deep tech startups. So, and maybe one very first thing to keep in mind is that the time horizons for these different technologies are very different. We have been focusing today on quantum computing. Eleni has talked about quantum communication, there's quantum sensing. There are some startups that are building products, like a company in Switzerland we've invested in, Funami, and they're generating revenues right now. there are companies that will generate revenues 5-6 years from now. So it's very, very different. And for investors, obviously, it makes a huge difference. So what you need is patient capital for investing in quantum computing, and that's for sure. But I'm deeply convinced also that we can have strategies, and we should have strategies to generate value earlier than later. I mean, these companies will have to survive, go through years of eventually difficulty with the technology because it's difficult. So I've spent my 3 or 4 years in a lab when I was doing my PhD with Alain Aspect in the dark, underground. I know it's difficult. Quantum is difficult. I mean, investors should realize that. It's not easy when you have your small mirrors, turning the knobs, and yeah, you lose your laser or whatever. I think it's really difficult. So everybody should keep that in mind when talking about quantum. I think it will take a while to achieve very good coherence, for example, things like that. But on the other hand, I'm deeply convinced that there are things we can do in between. I'm a strong supporter of approaches that, for example, with qubit pharmaceuticals, link HPC, classical, and quantum. So the mix of both, to my opinion, is really important. And to answer the first question, so that's what we try to do with Le Lab Quantique. So Le Lab Quantique is an association. It's a not-for-profit that we've created this year. But we've started actually working on that at the end of 2018. So when I came back from the US, I realized actually people talking about quantum were essentially scientists, academics. It was really hard to find a place where you could learn about quantum in a different way. So we started meetups, hackathons with School 42, conferences, and you know very well about that. We did one event together. BPI, so Jean-Christophe Goujon also has been very supportive. He's a founding member of Le Lab. So that was the first phase of Le Lab, really information with people. What we try to achieve now, starting right now, and I hope there'll be an announcement in a couple of weeks about that, is to build the downstream of everything we've been talking about with the hubs here. So you've got the connection with academia, industry, innovation. What we need to do is also address users, end users, and do it in the right way. We have startups offering products. We have end users wondering about how to approach quantum technologies, what to do, and the role of Le Lab Quantique. So there's a new concept we call La Maison du Quantique, a place really where things will happen physically. I think that will be that, to build these connections. It's a bit like qubit. Higher connectivity is better. We want to build connectivity between the different parties. Academics, hubs, one thing, and we will collaborate, of course. We're positioned a bit more downstream on use case, and making sure that people understand the strength of the power of the technologies, but also the limitations, and that's.
And
really
what's the role of software in that downstream exactly? In order that link. So how do you see that the role of the software as the bridging and
of the what? Sorry.
Software.
Of the software. Sorry. But it's fundamental, and I think that's clearly a weakness we have in Europe. So we're talking about France and Europe, with respect also to the rest of the world. So for example, I'm a coach at an incubator in Toronto. It's called the Creative Destruction Lab. I see 15 startups in quantum software per year, very few from continental Europe. So the UK is another story. I mean, there's been quite a lot of quantum software startups there. I think we need more in order to build this connection also with the end users. And we have talked today about, I think Cyril Alouche made the point also about the fact that people need to think about algorithms as well, not only about the qubits. And I think that's really fundamental. But the model is still not super clear. The stack is being built. It's not yet clear whether you should, as a startup, be in the middleware, maybe closer to applications or closer to the hardware. It's still in flux in terms of business model as well. But it's really super interesting because we are building the stack, literally as we speak.
Okay, so we started talking about the how after the what. I would like to ask Alexia, it's a kind of follow-up question to the discussion we had this morning on the energy and quantum technologies. You're a big advocate of the notion of quantum engineering on a broad scale. Could you elaborate on that and particularly explain us what you have done in the last 3 years with the quantum engineering in Grenoble, which is an existing ecosystem? So how do you develop this concept?
Yes, so quantum engineering is precisely this compound I was telling you about a few minutes ago. This is a compound between fundamental research, innovation, and industry. And if you remove one of the parts, it doesn't work anymore. So this concept, we have to bring it into existence if we want to bring second quantum revolution into existence. And this is what we have started to do in Grenoble since 2017. here we have to thank Grenoble University, which gave us the money way in advance to start building this ecosystem for quantum technologies, which I like to say goes from the philosopher to the industrial, and it's real. And we basically worked on 3 interfaces. You have quantum physics in the center, and then we create the interface with computer science. On the other hand, we create the interface with social science and philosophy. And third, we create the interface between quantum physics as a fundamental research topics and industry. And these interfaces, the way we created them was by funding PhD programs kind of heavily. Like we have now 30 PhD students that work on quantum technologies developed on these different interfaces, plus 2 chairs of excellence on these topics. And the big challenge here was to really be able to create interdisciplinarity. And actually it is a big word, very trendy word, but it's extremely difficult to do that when they have never worked together. And I remember at the beginning of the project, we spent a lot of time to brainstorm, to create the research map, to create the questions actually that were not existing before. If you want to make a physicist and a computer scientist work together, this is very difficult. And that way, we actually chose to keep some flexibility in the way we were giving the money. For instance, if there is not yet a clear research program, you would fund twin PhDs, 1 PhD in computer science and 1 PhD in quantum physics, so that the 2 guys, they start creating the common language, but their PhDs, they remain something efficient. I mean, they are still on their discipline. So we had to invent tools like this. For philosophy, I like to talk about that as well, even if it's a little bit out of the topics here, but actually this is about interdisciplinarity as well. We have a group of philosophers that is embarked in the lab and work with us, which is kind of unique experience, I would say, at the scale of the world. And the link with industrials have been developed within PhD grants where the students have to spend 4 to 6 months in some industrial partner. And these industrial partners were also part of the selection panels, and they were really amazed by the levels of the students we were able to attract. So this is links that they are searching for, the link with fundamental research on quantum physics, because there is a huge potential for attractivity of good students there. So that's it.
Okay, it's good insight. We're going to move to Eleni now. There's another issue probably in any country where you have several ecosystems. You have to connect them together. How do you manage the connection between different ecosystems? How would you do that, particularly when you have many ecosystems sometimes on the same fields or on a complementary fields? What's the best practice to do that?
Sure. So this is not tough at all. And I think we can make it work very nicely in France. I should say that we're not starting from anywhere, right? I mean, the ecosystem is being boosted at this point because of the importance of quantum technologies, but there are already efforts that have brought together the French quantum technology community. I'm going to cite, for example, the CNRS-ZDR, which is a research group, ICFA, which is coordinated by Sébastien Tanzili on a national level. And then at the Île-de-France region level, there has been CIRTEC, coordinated by Philippe Granzier. So we have good examples of what bringing people together can do. Okay, so now it's extremely important indeed, and we are taking this into account with the other hub coordinators to foster more and more concrete and scientific, on top of course, ecosystem type, like with industry, common events, etc. This is obvious, but even from a technical and scientific point of view, it's extremely important to bring people together. We don't want to bring isolated communities, right? This doesn't make any sense, doesn't have any sense, because we want to build up on the expertise of everyone in the thing, because we have different strengths and weaknesses. There are of of course strong points in all of them, in all of the hubs. They may be a little bit different, so it's important to leverage all of them. So I can give you a couple of examples. For example, using first the Ile-de-France region between the hubs in Paris and in Saclay. So we have very concrete plans that are supported by the Ile-de-France region. One is more linked to quantum computing and involves a collaboration with the Zensi supercomputer, the very big center of computing in the outskirts of Paris. And the other one is a quantum communication network for quantum key distribution and for future quantum communication applications, spanning the whole geographic area between Paris and Saclay. So I think these are very nice and concrete examples of how we can use the technologies, and it involves both initiatives. In hub-to-hub, let's say, initiatives involve both industrial and academic partners, big groups like Orange, Thales, Nokia, etc., and also startups like the ones that we had before, like Candela, VeriCloud, and other startups in the field that are involved in this initiative. So these are very good examples of how you can concretely make the hubs work together to increase your output. And I should also point out, and I think this is super important, that we should not focus only on Paris and Grenoble and Saclay. The rest of the territory in France has very top scientific quality. So I can cite also, giving the example of quantum communication. It's a very good example of our common work with the University of Côte d'Azur, for example, in Nice, where we would like to build the quantum communication link based on satellite, for example. So this is a very good example on how we can work together with the rest. And I will also cite, of course, Toulouse, Montpellier, Bordeaux, Strasbourg, and I hope I'm not forgetting anyone. I'm sure I'm forgetting. There is forces everywhere in France, and it's extremely important. It's on our side to bring all these forces together.
Okay. I will follow up with Nicolas on one remark from Alexia. Alexia mentioned the common language requirement. So how can we build a good common language between classical computer science people? There are many who have their own, habits, and this new language coming from the quantum world. And it looks like sometimes there are inconsistencies. So what can be done to build that common language?
Yeah, so this is indeed something we are looking for at Sorbonne University now for 4 or 5 years. And that's why we created our Quantum Information Center, which is to make this happen. But yeah, sorry, there's a bit of noise. But to tell a bit of history, so we have been starting to discuss together between computer scientists, and in particular the group of ELAM, which is here, and some physicists in the same university. And we have the big advantage to have really like equal part or very strong groups in both fields in our university. So we decided to sit together and to start to speak. And maybe if I can take a scientific example. So we discuss about what is verification or certification. And this is very interesting because it's not only about building a common language, which what you would think. It goes much beyond than that because it's constructively work to make something new. Like a physicist cannot derive an experiment to do verification without knowing the input from computer scientists. But the opposite is true also. So it's not only understanding each other, but also making something new by understanding what the other part is doing. And that's why we now are starting to do, and the first experiment and paper will come out, of these collaborations. And with that, we bring all the community of our universities that deals with quantum computing, quantum communications, and also a little bit like Alexia was saying, also a philosopher, because if I can keep on the same example, so the notion of trust or authenticity is something very important for people doing philosophy and for the acceptance of what you do to the public. And it's a key question that we have to discuss all together and to bring what we do to the next step, to really have something practical.
Okay, yeah. So Pascal, you also launched an initiative in Saclay around education. So was it different or similar to what we already mentioned?
It also falls into the category of common language, not quantum language, common language. In Saclay, so the Quantum Center of Science and Technology in Saclay was created a year ago from an initiative from the University Paris-Saclay, but it gathers now all the actors in academia and research in quantum science and technology. And I want to give you an example of, so we have a lot of things going on, and we are thinking a lot about all the topics that we are discussing right now, how to remove barriers, evolve, make our education program evolve. I want to give an example of a highly collective effort. So if you think of what we have in Saclay, we have major university education and a lot of graduate school, Institut d'Optique, Centrale Supélec, ENS Paris-Saclay, École Polytechnique, Télécom, etc., etc. And all these education institutions have different ways of addressing quantum education and complementary ways to do that. And we are working a lot on these different education programs, working on the master programs, but overall, we realize that bringing the interdisciplinarity that we need to this language gap we have between computer science and physics, not in standard program, education program. And so as a first step, and also maybe a first experiment, we just created this year a new education program. It's between the 2 years of master studies, and it's open to students coming from either physics, engineering, computer science, and chemistry. And we have students studying the basics of physics and computer science to become expert and contribute to these quantum technologies. And it's a program where we make sure that everyone follows despite their starting background and can join the effort. And they will have a long time. They have amazing teachers to help them do that. And then they will join the research effort in either in industrial and an academic lab. And what I also would like to underline here is that the teachers, the teachers in this new program come from all these different institutions that I was mentioning, different from university and graduate school. And this program was launched with the help of industrial sponsorship, so Air Liquide, Atos, and Total, who funds scholarships for the students, because when you add 1 year of education, of course, it should be open to all students, and it costs some. It's an investment for the students, so we help them do that, and it's thanks to the industrial sponsorship that we were able to do that. I think it's a very nice illustration of what a local ecosystem can do to address the challenges that we all mentioned during this session.
Okay, Christophe, time to come back to you. So we're still talking about how to build this magical ecosystem that we are hearing from so many opinions. So when is a good time to start a startup, a quantum startup? And what are the good fundraising opportunity that you can tell us, especially in France, for continuing this image that we were hearing about?
Okay, so the first question is really good. Second too is really good.
Thank you very much. All my questions are very good. I keep the good one for me.
And yeah, I feel, so out of the 12 companies we've invested in, so at Quantum Nation, I think probably 11 of the 12 are funded by scientists who have decided they wanted, they had this entrepreneur mindset and they wanted to create the company. But above all, they felt that the technology or the science was done. And now was the time for them to bring this technology to the markets one way or another. Quite frankly, I feel I've never seen the situation where or very rarely, actually I've seen it, but not so often, the situation where I tell a founder, you're not ready. I mean, go back to your lab. Let's discuss next year. I think the founders very often feel have a good intuition about the maturity of the technology. For me, the fact that the science is the first criteria for investment. When people ask me, I say, first science, show me the science. Is it good? Is it done? Do you have proof? And then we can start discussing about helping them structure the company. It takes a while. So I'm thinking about Pascal, about Qubit Pharmaceuticals as well, as mentioned earlier. Quite frankly, it took 18 months to 2 years from the first discussions to structure the company or the idea in a way that it was we could fund it, so bring capital to the company to really start operations. So people have to keep that in mind, that it takes also some time. It's we want to make sure that the conditions are good, but first thing, the science needs to be there. And about opportunities, I must say, and it's not because we've got BPI top management here already, but I must say France has the best ecosystem from this perspective. So I've been working in the US, in Canada. We have invested in the UK, in Spain, Switzerland as well. We're looking at other geographies like Italy. But in France, there's something very special. I think the incentives for early companies at pre-seed level are substantial and are very well done. I'd say it's not just money thrown at the companies. It's done in very good way, wise way, and matching investment with contonation, for example, and BPI through different mechanisms works really well. So it's not necessarily such a big amount of capital at the beginning, but putting professional investors together help the company grow, benefit from the different tools that are available. Fiscality, tax credits are also super important. So in France, I think when I mentioned the numbers, I will not go into it here, to other startups elsewhere, it looks super attractive. You have the good conditions to start a company. We need more projects, and that's a call for submissions in a way, if you want. I think we feel we need more projects for the future. There's definitely space for that. But the conditions from a financial perspective, I think, are really good. In order to source the project, that's the ecosystem for me that will help bring this project to investors. That's the work with the hubs here, or different persons who are willing to go into building this quantum economy. And I think the conditions in France, quite frankly, are rather good.
Maybe a follow-up and back to the how, not necessarily jumping to the quantum startup, but a question that popped up in the chat is saying that there is academic quantum training. We heard about Saclay, Paris Quantum Computing, Grenoble, that all of these things. But it's an interesting question. Is there a same training for companies, software, R&D that you think needs to be there and hence being part of the landscape of skill training? So what do you think of that and the need of that? To some extent, the role of Lab Quantique would be...
Yeah, that could be the role. That's definitely something that we have in mind. There's an entity that's doing a really good job, I forgot to mention, it's called Deep Tech Founders. That's a program for scientists who have, let's say, the intuition that their technology is ready for prime time, and they can go through this program and after a year decide whether or not it's a thing to do. So there's this kind of program for scientists and academics. And I think we definitely need more training, but training also for investors. One of the key questions that I see when investing with fellow VCs is that it's really difficult to understand and get it and find the experts. Finding the experts who understand the technology, but also the implications for the products, for what it's good for. These questions we've talked about: qubit fidelity, qubit number, connectivity, quantum volume, whatever. What do you make out of it? Quite frankly, when you look at that from the outside and you're asked to put a 5 million check, it's not that straightforward, and you don't find the expertise easily. So I think that's also something that at Le Lab Quantique we'd like to work on. Make sure that expertise is out. We want to act as a think tank, so we're working with Nicolas in particular, because mentioning here today, because he told me he has finished a white paper on quantum radars for Le Lab Quantique, which will be good, and something we'll publish very soon. But this role of taking the ideas, the expertise, also collaborating with academia in order to make this accessible, understandable by investors, among others, that's really super critical.
We need to wrap up, no?
We need to wrap up, so I have a proposal for you.
Talking too much.
Can you do a wrap-up? Yeah, to do a statement. So everyone should have a statement. So Nicolas, do you have a statement, a very short one? What do you, in a couple words?
Do I have a statement? Is that?
Yep, a statement on how to succeed with the ecosystem.
We know already, so we already collaborate, and that's where it goes. But we have to define a new field. Would it be at the research level and at the teaching level? So it's not the conjunction of two fields, it's really a new field that we are trying to do.
Okay, that's fine. Christophe?
So there's one I always say, which is it's not too late yet, it's not too early anymore. So I think
it's a good one.
And the second one is, especially in light of the plan that France is putting together, let's not forget the tools to build the ecosystem and to make it alive. I think everything we're talking about here needs some money. Need some resources. Le Lab Quantique is a not-for-profit. Still, we need to survive and to live. So even if the government puts billions, let's say, we still need to put some money to make things happen at our level. It's not necessarily a lot, but it will help a lot.
So we will put the first sentence in a big frame. It was a very good one. Eleni, an ID, simple ID to convey?
So I will agree with Christophe. We need resources. It's the time now that we need to put more resources to science and to industry for structuring the ecosystem in France. We heard that we can attract women. We heard that we can attract startups. France is a wonderful place to live in, so I'm pretty sure that we can use our nice ecosystem to bring talent. We have a huge amount of international collaborations from all sorts, which are extremely important for also fostering our ecosystem. So I think we're totally ready to take up the challenge of boosting quantum technologies in France.
Good. Alexia, the last word? Last word?
The plan.
What?
Launch the plan.
Oh, it's a good idea. Yeah.
Yes. Can we?
Voilà, that's it.
Okay, right. Pascal, the last word of the last word.
Yeah, well, it's in line with Alexia. We are ready. The community has been working and is in the starting block now, and it's been working for more than a year since the the Forteza mission and the announcement in January of the task force. We are ready. The community is ready. It's time to go. And it's true that the COVID crisis has postponed all that, but we are ready.
Qubit en marche.
Eh,
C'est ça. Qubit en marche. So,
Well, not only qubit, I mean also, sensing all that en marche.
okay. Fantastic. Thank you very much, everyone. That was an amazing. We can discuss forever, but I guess, we can finish, So
we have nearly finished.
we are nearly
We
finished.
still have one stop.
Want to stop? Of course. No,
Yeah.
but maybe, I forgot, we cannot go home yet. But maybe, shall we do the thank you now or not?
The what?
The thank
you. Oh, yes, you can do it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
I've been dying to say the thank you to the man behind the scene, Jean-Christophe, who made it possible over extended period of time. As you say that we are ready. He has been making everything already. It's been an amazing amount of work, midnight, and everything goes. So.
Thank you.